Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered why Japan, a country known for its rich spiritual traditions of Shintoism and Buddhism, has such a small Christian population today? The answer lies in a dark and dramatic chapter of its history, a story of faith, rebellion, and brutal suppression that culminated in one of the most tragic events of the Edo period. This is the story of the Shimabara Rebellion, the day 3,000 Christians faced their ultimate fate. Our story begins in the 16th century, when Portuguese missionaries, led by Francis Xavier, first arrived on Japanese shores in 1549. They brought with them not just new trade goods but a new faith, Christianity. At first, many powerful feudal lords, or daimyo, welcomed the foreigners. They were intrigued by European firearms technology and the potential for lucrative trade. Some even converted to Christianity, and the faith began to spread rapidly, particularly in the southern regions of Kyushu. It's estimated that by the early 1600s, there were over 300,000 Japanese Christians. Churches were built, communities flourished, and for a brief moment, it seemed like Christianity might become a major religion in Japan. But this period of tolerance was short-lived. The Tokugawa shogunate, which had just unified Japan after centuries of civil war, began to view this foreign religion with deep suspicion. They saw it as a tool of European colonial expansion and a threat to their newly established political stability. The allegiance of Japanese Christians to a foreign pope was seen as a direct challenge to the shogun's authority. The whispers grew louder. Were these converts loyal to Japan or to a distant power in Rome? The shogunate's fear soon turned into policy. In 1614, Tokugawa Ieyasu issued an edict officially banning Christianity. Missionaries were expelled, churches were destroyed, and Japanese Christians were given a horrifying choice: renounce their faith or face death. This marked the beginning of a ruthless and systematic persecution. Believers were forced to stomp on religious images called fumie to prove their apostasy. Those who refused were subjected to unimaginable tortures. They were burned at the stake, crucified, or thrown into boiling hot springs. Yet, despite the danger, many held onto their faith in secret, becoming what we now know as Kakure Kirishitan, or hidden Christians. They disguised their prayers, concealed crosses, and worshipped in secret rooms, passing their beliefs down through generations under the constant threat of discovery. The situation reached its breaking point in the late 1630s on the Shimabara Peninsula near Nagasaki. This region was a hotbed of Christian faith, but it was also suffering under the crushing weight of famine and tyrannical overtaxation by the local lord. The people were desperate. Their crops had failed, yet the tax collectors showed no mercy, seizing what little food they had left. The suffering was immense, and it wasn't just Christians who were affected. The local ronin, or masterless samurai, were also disenfranchised and angry. Economic despair and religious persecution created a volatile powder keg, and it was about to explode. In the winter of 1637, the people rose up, led by a charismatic 16-year-old boy named Amakusa Shiro, who was revered by his followers as a heaven-sent leader. An army of peasants, fishermen, and ronin, many of them Christians, launched a full-scale rebellion. They weren't just fighting against high taxes, they were fighting for their very souls. Their battle cry was a mix of religious fervor and desperate hope. Under banners adorned with Christian symbols, they fought with astonishing courage, initially overwhelming the local lord's forces. The rebels, now numbering around 37,000 men, women, and children, fortified themselves in the abandoned Hara Castle, a crumbling fortress on a cliff overlooking the sea. From this stronghold, they managed to withstand the shogun's massive army for months. The shogunate was stunned and humiliated. How could a band of peasants hold off the might of the samurai elite? They laid siege to the castle, cutting off all food and supplies. They even enlisted the help of Dutch trading ships to bombard the fortress from the sea. A bitter irony given that the Dutch were Protestant rivals of the Catholic Portuguese and Spanish. Inside Hara Castle, conditions grew desperate. Food ran out. Ammunition was scarce. The rebels were starving, but their faith and their will to resist remained unbroken. They held out through the harsh winter, repelling assault after assault from the shogunate's forces, but their fate was sealed. In April 1638, the shogun's army, now over 125,000 strong, launched a final, overwhelming assault. The castle walls were breached, and what followed was a massacre. The samurai forces showed no mercy. They swept through the fortress, slaughtering nearly everyone inside. Men, women, children. No one was spared. The rebellion was crushed in a tide of blood. Amakusa Shiro, the young leader, was killed, and his head was put on a pike in Nagasaki as a gruesome warning to any who might dare to defy the shogun again. Of the 37,000 rebels who had taken refuge in Hara Castle, it is believed that almost all were killed. One historical account mentions a specific final stand, where around 3,000 of the most devout Christian fighters made their last stand in the castle's inner citadel before being completely annihilated. The aftermath of the Shimabara rebellion was profound and lasting. The shogunate, terrified by the scale of the uprising, slammed the doors of Japan shut. They implemented the policy of sakoku, or national seclusion, cutting off almost all contact with the outside world for over 200 years. The persecution of Christians intensified, becoming even more brutal and thorough. The faith was driven so deep underground that for centuries, many thought it had been completely eradicated from Japan. It wasn't until the 1850s, when Japan was forced to reopen to the West, that the hidden Christians finally emerged from the shadows, shocking the world with their story of survival. The Shimabara rebellion stands as a brutal testament to the lengths the Tokugawa shogunate would go to maintain control, and a tragic monument to the thousands who died for their beliefs. It's a powerful, somber reminder of a time when faith and politics collided with devastating consequences on the shores of Japan. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a crucial part of Japanese history. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.